wouldn't recommend anybody jumps into starting a company. There needs to be the passion behind it for that to be a success.
Now back to my lively conversation with prominent Silicon Valley investor and entrepreneur Reid Hoffman and his views of U.S. politics this election cycle. I asked Hoffman for his thoughts on investor Peter Thiel's backing of Republican nominee Donald Trump. Take a listen.
Peter and I have been arguing for nearly 30 years since we were undergraduates together at Stanford. It's a long thing, and we argue about a lot of different things. I think Peter feels intensely that we need that kind of radical change. Obviously part of the reason he was willing to give what was by and large a very good speech at the commencement, the convention, which was actually, in fact, I felt, yes, we are builders. Yes, we should be builders. But actually, Hillary is the candidate for that, not Trump. I disagree with you on that. And so he and I, because we both value truth, we talk about this a lot. And we're in a constant state of argument about it. I think, of course, I'm right. And I think that he is inventing policies for Trump that Trump doesn't have.
Do you think this will hurt Peter ultimately when it comes to entrepreneurs and support within the Valley? Do you think he'll lose companies as a result of this, lose out on deals?
I think that because he is such a strong supporter of entrepreneurship, I think the impact would be relatively minimal. But I do think, like most of the questions that I get from people here who are strong business people, who invent the future, who are trying to be good Americans, both for the US and abroad, say, has he gone crazy? Why does he have the views he has? Like, I get that. Literally, that's the first, anyone who knows that I know him, that's the first question I get. Because I think, we know what we need to do in order to try to help all of America, and that's Hillary, not Trump. Why is Peter like off in this weird place by himself? And I have to explain the fact that, he in fact thinks we need a really radical change, and he's inventing policies that I've actually never credibly seen from the Trump camp.
And let's be clear, you don't think he's gone crazy?
Well, maybe a little.
Now, I know that you didn't make the decision to put your name out there like this lightly. You represent companies, you work with a lot of different companies. Why did you decide to step up to the plate? And there have been a lot of business leaders out there tiptoeing around their disdain for Trump, and I'm sure there's some doing the same for Hillary Clinton. Do they have an obligation to speak up?
So I think they do. I think that one of the things, look, when it's kind of the candidates are close together, I think it's a reasonable business position to say, look, I'm going to be inclusive by being apolitical. I'm just not going to comment, Republicans buy Nikes too, I think that this is literally two different planets of choices. I think on one hand, you have the most prepared candidate in history who has a lot of experience, who has great ratings when she was Secretary of State, will be great on the foreign policy, has depth of experience in the Senate and working with Congress, has experience in the White House as First Lady. You just get this very, very long, like, look, I know how this game is played, and I can start immediately day one being very effective. And then you have a reality television star who does slogans, right? And so I think when you're in that kind of situation, you have to say, look, we got to step up. This matters. This will matter deeply to all Americans in the next 4 years. What will be our standing in the globe? What will be our improvement of our economy? Or, Larry Summers says we're going to go into a recession nearly immediately if we choose wrong here. Let's make the right choice. And I think that the business leaders need to say, look, I normally try to stay out of this, and I need to be inclusive to my employees. I need to be inclusive to my shareholders. I need to be inclusive to my customers. But I need to step up and say, as a leader, what do I think?
I know you talk to everyone, Reid. You are the biggest networker in Silicon Valley. You have the biggest network in Silicon Valley. What have you been trying to encourage people to do behind the scenes?
So what I've been trying to encourage them to do is to figure out where they can lead. I think everyone can lead. I think if you're an individual, you can lead. Obviously, the more power, the more resources, the more influence you have, you can lead more. And so it's like, speak up about the things that you think are most important. I mean, at very least, inform the electorate. It's like, say, look, if we think that this is going to be a complete disaster for business, that his business is actually kind of, I think it's 4 bankrupt casinos, something like that, right? That if you want to be a voice for what is good for business, step up and say what that is. And you can say it in a very gentle way. You don't have to engage in the vitriol that is so common from Trump in this. You just say, look, here's what I think the right decisions are. and here's what I think you should think about when you're going to the polls.
Now, I know you are very interested in the political process. You've posted about the political process. When it comes to the electoral process, what makes you most angry? The way that elections are run today, the way that this country is run today?
So I think there's a lot of things. So the most is difficult. I think the thing that's most difficult is it a little bit like, for example, the obstructionism in the confirmation of the ninth justice, right? Is we are in this boat together. Let's work together. We may have points of difference. We may say, look, I think that X should be the policy versus Y, but we are in the boat together. Let's work together, right? Let's not do lots of name calling. Let's not create fictions around birth certificates for years. Let's not do any of that. Let's say, how do we actually, in fact, figure out a way to improve the boat we're on? Because we're all on it. And that's the thing that most frustrates me about the political process.
I know you love games. You created a card game called Trumped Up Cards, the world's biggest deck, which you call a satire that reveals the absurdity of our current situation, and the proceeds will go to charities that you say are already making America great.
Yes.
What's the idea here?
So the idea was games are things that, like card games, are things you do socially. It creates the context by which you can have a conversation. And clearly, I think it's absurd that we have someone whose primary qualification is reality television star running for president. But the thought is, think about it. Be informed. Consider what the positions are. Consider how people think about it. And because absurdity, in the tradition of The Daily Show and tradition of John Oliver, is actually, in fact, very good education, we thought, ooh, this would be a good way of having kind of edutainment. And the thought is people can play it and then talk about it and kind of go, well, what would be the right choice? What would be an informed choice? And that's the idea.
And this is, by the way, a game that now everybody can buy, all citizens, and on the side of the box it says, including Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin can buy this game. Last question for you, Reed. I know it's hard to ponder at this moment, but if Donald Trump is elected, what will you do? Will you move to Canada? Will you leave the country? What will you do?
Well, my obligation as a citizen is to stay. But for the first time in my life, I have the emotional impulse of, boy, Vancouver's not such a bad town, right? So, and that's part of the reason why I decided to get so active. I saw that emotion in myself, and I went, oh gosh, right? I have to step up, because if I, who feel very deeply about the patriotic responsibilities of being a citizen, it's not just an entitlement, it's a responsibility. If I'm having that emotion, I should step into the game.
My interview there with entrepreneur and investor Reid Hoffman. Now, to a story we are following, U.S. regulators are claiming Palantir Technologies discriminates against Asians, again raising questions about diversity in Silicon Valley. The Labor Department